Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Welcome to the Bodhidharma sermons. This is the first sermon of the series of Dhamma talks. Our topic is Avijja in Buddhism. Prince Siddhartha, later known as the Gautama Buddha, during his quest to understand what suffering is, learned that in an untrained mind there lives a particular thing called ignorance, or avijja in Pali language. In Buddhism, the word avijja or ignorance does not mean that you are out of your mind. The word is to ignore. It immediately makes you ask what you are ignoring. We are unconsciously ignoring how everything actually works in life, how human cognition works. Without understanding how human cognition operates, we get caught reacting to life rather than experiencing our internal likeness of being. We forget our gentler nature. Of course, we never knew that this process of human cognition existed before. We can't be blamed for the fact that it is being ignored. Our likeness of being is hidden underneath the tension and likeness we personally carry with us during daily life. The Buddha taught us that ignorance supports craving to happen. Along with ignorance, delusion feeds the suffering. Delusion is the spark that ignites the craving, which the Buddha said is the complete cause of suffering. In Buddhism, this word delusion means that we have established a false idea, a false concept of an independent self. We have embraced the idea that each of us is independent of all others, and thus we have missed our connection to our own species. The consequence of this leads us to believe that everything we experience is very personal. We begin to believe that everything is happening to us. We believe our experience is part of us, and that somehow we need to take total control of everything or suffer heavier consequences. But is this true? Is this very idea that causes us to suffer from an imbalanced personal perspective? The Buddha explained that we all have 6 sense doors through which we experience the external world. To name them, they are the external eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the internal sense door of mind. All of these operate in a very impersonal way. But when we begin our investigation, we don't believe this is possible. Our psychophysical body sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, or thinks about our world because we cognize all experience through a series of connected links operating an impersonal process that the Buddha called dependent origination. In Pali language, this process is called Paticca Samuppada. Now, today in the medical community, it is recognized that this process is in line with the scientific research of human cognition. We could say that the Buddha was actually the father of the study of cognitive psychology and modern human cognition because he seems to be the earliest on record. Within this cycle of existence, to talk about this subject in depth. Human cognition is a process that happens extremely fast by initial contact occurring. An arising feeling happens through any one of the 6 sense doors. Usually, an uninformed, untrained mind takes this very personally. But if these sense doors truly work impersonally, as systems within an impersonal body, then it must be true that they are not mine, they are not me, they are not myself, and they are not I either. Through a persistent investigation, the Buddha uncovered the truth of this. Upon his close investigation, he essentially found that our experience in this life happens through the actual sights, sounds, odors, tastes, tangibles, and thoughts that arise through these impersonal working sense doors in body and mind. When you look closely at how they operate, how this happens, an impersonal process is revealed. When we discover this truth, we see that it follows that these experiences must not take personally. Realizing of this fact can change our perspective. This is a shift moving towards an impersonal perspective where we should be able to let go of any arising obstacles in life. If we do this, then life becomes lighter. Buddhist delusion, therefore, clearly means that up until now, we have likely been deluded, confused into believing that everything this is happening should be taken personally, when actually this isn't true at all. The message here is, things don't have to be so heavy. When suffering is the consequence of the way we take up things, the degree of tension in our body increases in the way we take up things. Maybe we become dissatisfied because when we take things personally, it feels like it is our fault and we are no longer in tight control of what is going on. But actually, the question here is, did we ever really control it before? The Buddha called the view where you think everything is me, atta, view or perspective. This is an unharmonious perspective where you believe everything happening is personally me. It is part of me. He called this new impersonal view anatta perspective. This is a more harmonious perspective where we can begin to see things more clearly in a less personal way. The Buddha realized that the root of suffering lies within this process of cognition, where tension and tightness first arise. We first experience suffering at the link we call craving, tanha in Pali. Although it is true that there is a hairline of craving attention in the previous links which arise in the line of human cognition, it is not until I personally step into the play at the craving link where my first opinion enters in that it becomes obvious that suffering begins. Thus, arising of tension and tightness in mind and in body are triggered by the first personal opinion, the original Buddhist view, a personal view of how I like or I dislike something. And this first obviously happens in the craving link. Our personal dissatisfaction with the way things are at any present time is suffering. The rising tension in this craving link is a symptom that you and I can learn to identify before suffering gets stronger and expands through mental proliferation, or in Pali, upadana, and turns into reactions. If we can learn to notice this system as it is arising, then we have a chance of letting it go before more damage happens. Therefore, we should memorize that. Craving always manifests as tension and tightness in mind and in body. It is the I like it or the I don't like it. We ourselves give birth to that I like it or the I don't like it. Through our ignorance, and we make a quick unconscious choice out of habit. Without me taking things personally, craving will not arise. Keep in mind, without me taking things personally, craving will not arise. The best part is that by practicing a more impersonal perspective, day to day, in everything we are doing, we can attempt to change this natural pathway, to let go of this personal opinion each time we feel the sensation of tension arising. Then things change. That is why meditation practice is so important to carry with us all the time. It is our repetition of retraining the brain that builds new natural pathways, and then we learn to respond instead of reacting under any circumstances. During his personal investigation, the Buddha found out how mind really works, achieving a higher knowledge of how things work, and practicing this kind of impersonal perspective is progressive. Changing to a more impersonal perspective leads to reducing suffering immediately in life. It turns out that we can retrain our mind to respond to life in a very different way if we are persistent in our effort to purify and train or retrain it. This is why we carry our practice with us into life and try to use it in all situations all the time. The Buddha studied precisely what the suffering actually is and how it happens. Before his enlightenment, when he was still a bodhisattva, he suspected that some kind of process was going on that people did not know about. He found out that this process was very impersonal. In the Samyutta Nikaya of Tripitaka, called the origination, we find that he explained to his monks how he reasoned out the process of dependent origination. This was before he realized he could see it in meditation. Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still a bodhisattva, not yet fully enlightened, it occurred to me, alas, this world has fallen into trouble. In that it is born, ages, and dies. It passes away and is reborn, yet it does not understand an escape from this suffering headed by aging and death. I investigated this process very carefully. Now, when we read this passage, it could be only about life, death, and another round of life and death. But if you consider for a moment that the Buddha taught what is called the middle way, we might venture to say that it is logical to presume that he investigated this process in more than one way. It is possible to apply to one event in life at a time. This is not that far-fetched when you begin to examine it more closely. the line of dependent origination, can refer even to what is called in Pali Khanika Maran, or the moment-to-moment cycle of this same process. However, the macrocosmic line of lifetime to lifetime, to lifetime, doesn't help you and me here and now anymore, that watching at first, moment to moment, how it works, but examine one event at a time, which takes place, that does make sense. Venturing into an investigation of individual phenomenological events in life, one at a time, can get very interesting and reveal how many mind states happen in this lifetime for each of us. It is good to learn how the process we apply is to one event at a time in life in that very fashion. This means you will be able to watch how arising emotions occur for things like anger, anxiety, depression, grief, hatred. Within one event you see happening at a time. The Buddha continued to work on his investigation and discovered the process consisted of 12 links. Suffering can be felt strongly first at the part he indicated to be the weakest link, called craving, tanha in Pali. During his meditation practice, the Buddha witnessed the rising of suffering many thousands of times. He noticed that suffering always appears following a subtle change in the level of tension in the mind and body as craving first comes up. A pleasant or painful feeling arises just before this craving happens. The Buddha broke this process down and observed very closely how contact, phassa in Pali, feeling, vedana in Pali, and craving, tanha in Pali, always occur in the same systematic way. The Buddha concluded that the real suffering actually is the personal sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair that happens following the point of craving. Craving always manifests as tension and tightness in mind and body involving the I like it, or I don't like it, as it consciously pops up immediately following the arising of any pleasant or painful feeling. The craving seems to be habitual. It is our personal habit to try to take control and have an opinion during our experience. In such cases, where personal attachment or aversion occur, an increase of tension happens, which turns out to be the building block for stress. If we do not understand, there is an escape from this situation. Today, we know that stress is the foundation block for many states of disease in mind and body. The Buddha observed that personal view is what sparks craving. And the craving grows stronger and the tension happens more strongly. Tension is the foundation block for stress, and then more severe suffering happens. By believing that this tension is a part of me, is mine, and is myself, this in turn leads to dissatisfaction with the truth of what is happening here and now in the present time. Therefore, taking things personally leads to suffering, many times in the forms of restlessness, guilt, and remorse.